Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're taking a deep dive into cybersecurity.
Sounds exciting.
It is, especially these days. Specifically, we're going to be looking at how to keep organizational data safe.
Right.
It's a bit of a digital Wild West out there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So whether you're, getting ready for a meeting or just super curious about this stuff, we've got a ton of great info to go through. Articles, research, the works. We'll break it all down and pull out the most interesting bits.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, great. So the thing that really jumps out from all this material is just how many threats are out there.
Yeah.
It's not just like the lone hacker in a hoodie anymore.
Right.
We're talking about, organized crime, state-sponsored attacks, the whole 9 yards.
Absolutely. I mean, the threat landscape has just exploded. And the methods, they're so sophisticated now.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So before we get into solutions and all that, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Like, what exactly are we talking about when we say cybersecurity?
Good point.
Our sources define it as basically protecting computers, servers, networks, and data from attacks, theft, damage, or unauthorized access.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. I mean, it really highlights how cybersecurity is about protecting the most vital part of any organization today, their data. And that takes a multi-layered approach.
Okay, so multi-layered. I like that. And our sources actually break down some of the key aspects of this. Network security, application security, information security. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But maybe we can focus on the most, crucial layers when it comes to specifically protecting that organizational data. What would you say those are?
Well, given what we were just talking about, the sheer scale of the threats, I'd say network security is absolutely fundamental. It's like building a fortress, right? Around all your digital assets.
A digital fortress. I like that.
You need firewalls, intrusion detection systems, security information, and event management tools. All of those are essential for monitoring network traffic, blocking anything malicious, detecting those potential threats early on.
So it's like, you've got your moat and your watchtowers guarding the castle walls.
Exactly. But, even with the strongest walls, it won't help if you leave the doors unlocked, right?
Sure.
That's where identity and access management comes in. You have to control who has access to what data and make absolutely sure that only authorized users can get to the sensitive stuff.
Okay, so we're talking strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, maybe even biometrics.
All of that, yeah. And it applies to everyone, from the CEO down to the newest intern. 1 weak link, and the whole system is compromised.
Right, yeah. So that makes sense. But what about the data itself? Let's say someone actually gets past the network security, they gain access. What then?
That's where information security comes in. It's all about protecting the data itself, both when it's moving and when it's at rest. Things like encryption, data loss prevention systems, regular backups, those are key. So encryption basically scrambles the data, makes it unreadable without the right key, and DLP systems, they monitor and prevent sensitive data from leaving the organization's control.
So it's like a vault with multiple locks and a whole security system, for those crown jewels.
Yeah, exactly. Even if someone gets past the guards, those jewels are still protected. And then backups, those are like your spare key to the vault, just in case.
Just in case. Smart. So we've got the fortress walls, access control, the vault itself. But what are we actually guarding against?
Right.
What's lurking out there in the digital world trying to break in?
Well, a lot. But our sources highlight a few threats that are especially common and, frankly, dangerous. Malware is a big one. Malicious software designed to, infiltrate and disrupt systems. Viruses, worms, Trojans, ransomware, it goes on.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty scary. But isn't that stuff mostly targeting individuals, not whole organizations?
Not always. You're right. Some malware attacks are opportunistic, but many are very targeted. Attackers are specifically aiming to get into corporate networks, steal that sensitive data. Ransomware, for example, can literally encrypt a company's entire data infrastructure. Shuts everything down, can cost millions in ransom payments, recovery efforts.
So it's not just losing the data.
No.
It's the disruption, the financial hit, potentially even reputation damage.
Absolutely. And then there's phishing, a social engineering tactic where they try to trick users into giving up sensitive info like passwords, financial details, often through emails or websites that look totally legit.
Yeah, We've all seen those, like suspicious emails, promising lottery winnings or saying your account needs updating. But how effective is that against, whole companies? Don't IT departments usually filter that stuff out?
They do, they do. But phishing is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Attackers are getting so good at crafting these messages, they look totally real, often impersonating people or organizations you actually trust. And even the best filters, they can't catch everything.
So one employee clicks a bad link, and the whole network is potentially at risk.
That's right. And that's why security awareness training for employees is so important. Teaching them to recognize and avoid those phishing attempts, to use strong passwords, to report anything suspicious. It's all about building that awareness.
Right. Okay, so we've covered malware, phishing. Anything else we need to watch out for?
Well, denial of service attacks are becoming more and more common. They basically flood a network or server with traffic. It overwhelms the system, makes it unavailable to legitimate users. Imagine a website crashing during like a big sales event or a critical service going offline during an emergency. The impact can be huge.
So it's not about stealing the data this time.
No.
It's about disrupting operations, which of course still costs the organization money.
Exactly. And these attacks, they used to be fairly simple to launch, but they're getting more sophisticated, much harder to defend against.
It sounds like organizations are constantly under attack.
In a way, they are. That's why it's so important to have that robust security posture, as we were saying. It's not just reacting to threats. It's proactively implementing measures to prevent them from happening in the first place.
And I'm guessing that goes beyond just, technical stuff.
For sure. You need the right tools and technologies, but building a strong security culture within the organization is just as critical. It's about everyone understanding the importance of cybersecurity, empowering every employee to play a role in protecting the data.
That makes a lot of sense. So far, this has been incredibly insightful. It's clear that cybersecurity is this complex, constantly changing field, and organizations need to be, proactive and vigilant.
Definitely. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the frameworks and strategies that organizations can actually use to build that robust security posture we've been talking about, how to protect themselves from these evolving threats.
Welcome back. So we've talked about how serious these cyber threats are and all the different layers of defense organizations need.
Yeah.
But how do they actually implement all of this? Like, where do they even begin?
Yeah, it can definitely feel overwhelming. Luckily, there are these well-established cybersecurity frameworks. They basically provide a roadmap.
Okay, frameworks. Our sources mention NIST and ISO 27001 as a couple of the big ones.
Yeah.
So let's start with NIST. What does that even stand for, and how does it actually help organizations, navigate all this?
Sure. NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Okay.
And their cybersecurity framework is basically a set of guidelines, not rigid rules, which is great because it means organizations of all sizes and all industries can really use it. It's become kind of a global standard.
So it's flexible, you're saying. It can be adapted to different organizations' needs.
Exactly. And it's organized around 5 core functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover.
Okay. Those sound pretty straightforward, but let's break them down a bit. What does identify actually mean in practice?
Well, it starts with really understanding your organization's assets. Like, what data do you have? Where is it stored? How valuable is it? Then you have to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. This could involve, penetration testing, vulnerability scans, threat intelligence analysis, really getting a clear picture of what's out there.
So it's like a risk assessment, figuring out what needs protecting and who might be after it.
Exactly. And once you've identified your assets and those vulnerabilities, then you can move on to protect. This is about implementing safeguards to, mitigate those risks.
Okay, so this is where we get into the actual cybersecurity measures.
Yeah.
Right? Firewalls, encryption, access controls, all that.
Yeah, all of that. But it also includes things like security awareness training for employees, making sure they know what to look out for, data backup and recovery plans, and strong vendor management practices. Because, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Right. So you can have all the technology in the world, but if someone makes a mistake, it can all be for nothing.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say we've identified our risks. We've put those protections in place. What's next?
Yeah. What then?
Then it's detect. Having systems and processes in place to quickly identify any suspicious activity, anything that might point to an attack. We're talking intrusion detection systems, SIEM tools, log analysis, and continuous security monitoring. You have to be watching all the time.
So it's not just about preventing attacks, but also about being able to spot them quickly if they do happen.
Exactly, because early detection is key. It can really minimize the damage. Then comes respond. This means having a plan in place for when a security incident does occur, incident response procedures, communication protocols, forensics capabilities.
So it's like a fire drill, but for cyber attacks.
That's a great way to put it. Everyone knows what to do, who to contact, how to contain the damage. The goal is to minimize downtime, get that data back, and stop the attack from spreading further. And then finally, you have recover, getting those systems and data back to their pre-attack state.
And that's where those data backups we talked about earlier come in.
Absolutely. But recovery also means patching vulnerabilities, hardening your systems, and importantly, learning from what happened, figuring out how to prevent similar attacks from happening again. It's about coming back stronger, more resilient.
So the NIST framework really does give you that whole roadmap for managing cybersecurity risks. But what about ISO 27001? How is that different?
Well, ISO 27001 is an international standard. It's all about information security management systems, or ISMS for short. It's a bit more prescriptive than the NIST framework, I'd say. It outlines specific requirements that organizations have to meet to get certified.
It's like a seal of approval.
Yeah.
Proof that an organization meets a certain level of cybersecurity maturity.
Exactly. And ISO 27001 helps organizations establish a systematic approach to managing those information security risks. It covers everything: risk assessment, policy development, incident management, business continuity planning.
So both NIST and ISO 27001 offer really valuable guidance for any organization looking to up their cybersecurity game. But it's not just about following frameworks, is it?
Yeah.
You also have to understand the specific threats and vulnerabilities that are relevant to your industry and your organization.
I completely agree. There's no one-size-fits-all solution in cybersecurity. You have to tailor your approach. And speaking of tailoring your approach, our sources also highlight some legal and regulatory frameworks that play a big role in protecting data.
Right, the legal side of things.
Exactly. Let's talk about those next.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about frameworks and strategies and all that.
Right.
But it seems like there's also a whole legal and regulatory side to cybersecurity. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. Cybersecurity isn't just about the technical stuff. It's also about following the law. There are all these laws and regulations designed to protect sensitive data, and they can be different depending on, what industry you're in and where you are in the world.
That makes sense. So what are some of the big ones that organizations need to know about?
Well, one of the most well-known is the GDPR.
GDPR.
The General Data Protection Regulation. It went into effect back in 2018, and it applies to any organization that handles the personal data of individuals in the European Union. Doesn't matter where the organization itself is based.
So even if a company's in the U.S., but they're dealing with data from EU citizens, they still have to follow GDPR.
Exactly. And GDPR is pretty comprehensive. It gives individuals a lot more control over their data, the right to access it, correct it, even erase it. Organizations have to have clear, lawful reasons for processing that data in the first place. They need to have strong security measures in place. And if there's a data breach, they have to report it.
It sounds like GDPR has really raised the bar for data protection globally.
Yeah, it definitely has. And a lot of other countries and regions have followed suit, implemented their own data protection laws. In the U.S., for example, there's the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, gives similar protections to residents of California.
So organizations really need to do their homework and figure out which laws apply to them.
For sure.
What about industry-specific regulations? Are there any that are particularly important?
Absolutely. In healthcare, you have IPAY. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act sets really strict standards for protecting patient health information, making sure those electronic health records are confidential, accurate, and accessible, and, of course, preventing any unauthorized access or disclosure.
Makes sense. That's really sensitive data.
It is. And then in the financial world, there's PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. This applies to any organization that handles credit card transactions. They have to meet specific requirements for secure payment processing, data encryption, regular security assessments, all to protect that cardholder data.
So like every time we swipe our credit cards, PCI DSS is working in the background to keep our info safe.
Exactly. And the thing is, if companies don't comply with these regulations, there can be serious consequences. Big fines, lawsuits, damage to their reputation.
Yeah. So it's clear that cybersecurity is not just a tech issue. it's a legal and compliance issue too.
Absolutely. Organizations need to think about it holistically. You have to integrate those legal and regulatory requirements into your security strategies and policies right from the start.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
understanding the threats, the frameworks, the strategies, even the legal side of things. What would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just on the IT department. Everyone in the organization needs to be involved from the top down.
And it's an ongoing process, right? Not a one-time fix.
For sure. The threats are constantly changing, so you have to be proactive, vigilant, and adaptable. Stay up to date on the latest threats, implement the right security measures, and always be reviewing and improving your security posture. Never get complacent.
I think that's a great point to end on. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay ahead of the curve. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into cybersecurity.